In the studio today, we are talking with Bruce Patterson, Anderson Valley resident and author of 2 books, Walking Tractor and Turned Around in My Boots. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you.
Both the books have an autobiographical bent, so let's start by asking you to talk to the audience a little bit about your childhood in Chicago, and shall we call those the impressionable years?
The toddler years.
The toddler years.
I was born in the same South Side slums my parents were born in, my grandparents landed in. I'm half Irish, half Slovak. When I was a little kid, we jumped in our Kaiser and moved to the City of Angels. My dad called us bats out of hell, and for good reason. And that's about all my Chicago years. You can take the people out the slums.
Okay. And so why did your family relocate to Southern California?
The promised land, City of Angels. No more snow, slush, opportunity, wide open spaces, everything that you wouldn't find on the west side of Chicago.
Did it deliver its promise?
At first, yes, definitely. It was beautiful. Southern California was incredibly beautiful at that time.
And what time period were we talking about?
We moved to LA in '53. I was born in '49.
Okay.
And
at the age of 17, you volunteered for the armed forces. What prompted you to take that action?
well, what you'd expect. It's a famous scene in Casablanca where the Gestapo officer asks Humphrey Bogart, what's an American like him doing in Morocco? And Bogart says, I came for the water. And the Gestapo guy says, this is Morocco, there's no water here. And Bogart doesn't bat an eye, says, well, I was misinformed. And that's why I went to Vietnam.
You returned home from Vietnam. What was different about your life?
Oh, everything. Turned inside out, flipped, turned around in my boots. Mm-hmm. Which is a combat Bush term for what, when you realize the war is not a movie, you know, you're not the star of a docudrama, you're playing for keeps. Mm-hmm. So, in that I was no different, absolutely typical. I mean, Ulysses was the first messed up vet, right? You win this great victory in Troy, and it takes you 10 years to get home, and then you got to fight to make your way back in. Me, I scooted to the hills. So.
On your return from Vietnam, where did you land in the United States?
I still had a year left on my enlistment. I was with the Airborne. Okay. And I was a wounded vet, so anyways, I got sent back to North Carolina, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, 82nd Airborne, and I didn't want to jump out of airplanes no more, so I told them that, so they sent me to a janitor company. And I had a lot of fun, very lax discipline in a janitor company.
Right.
So then I turned against the war, so after I got out, I stayed in Carolina for a while. I was in love with a woman. I was also involved in the anti-war movement down there.
So from going from a person that willingly enlisted for the Vietnam War to an anti-war proponent, that happened over a course of time. How did that evolve for you?
Well, can I read?
Absolutely.
My experience in Vietnam turned me against the war. It wasn't like after carefully weighing all of the evidence and balancing the pros and cons, I'd up and changed my mind. What happened was the process was so common that us grunts had a name for it. I got turned around in my boots. It was like an explosion of experiences with me in the center of the impact dome, with bleeding ears and dust settling, looking down and seeing my boots pointing due north while the rest of me was pointing due south. I'd arrived in combat ready to play a game, have some fun, become a man, take some scalps, serve my country, and earn the everlasting gratitude and esteem of my countrymen and women and girls. But war wasn't a game. Another Bush term for getting turned around in your boots, getting your cherry popped. So that's why. So I was reborn, you might say, since that's a pretty popular term nowadays. Everybody's reborn at something.
Right. And this was when you landed back in North Carolina?
No, this is after my first firefight. I said, my God, I got 11 and a half months to go. I'm just getting started.
Right. But then you became much more active, obviously, when you landed back in the USA.
Well, I turned against the war. All of us did. I mean, there weren't too many guys. After the Tet Offensive, anyways, who were gung-ho.
Right. And a little bit in your book, you talk about the anti-war activities that you did also kind of came together with the civil rights movement at the time.
Yeah, North Carolina is a different place than Southern California.
Could you tell the audience a little bit about the similarities of the two movements and how they kind of interacted for you?
No, it's essentially about human rights. If you believe in equality, then you shouldn't be killing people. War is a horrible thing. If there's no killing, there's no war. It's by definition killers. So you're a killer. Why did all these people die? What are you fighting for? Then when you go overseas, the only war that might be worth fighting for is off your own front porch. But then you've been ruined. I mean, did the French win World War II, or the people of Central Europe? Did the Vietnamese win? They lost 5. The Indo-Chinese lost 5 million people. Their society was destroyed.
No one really wins a war, do they?
No, of course not.
So, from North Carolina to Southern California, you made a transition. You made your way up from the Bay Area to Sonoma County and then eventually to Henderson Valley, is that correct?
No, yeah, I followed Dylan's advice. I hit bottom. I was in a relationship with a woman and very much involved in the LA anti-war movements, Vietnam Veterans Against the War, other organizations. And then Nixon was reelected. I realized I was beaten. The war was eating me alive because it was still going on.
Right.
It wasn't like it was in the past. So I got an opportunity to move to a farm in the Central Valley, in the San Joaquin Valley.
Uh-huh.
So I did that, and then shortly afterward, I had a falling out with the honcho there. So I wound up taking shelter with some friends and living in a barn in Sonoma County. And then I got a sheep shearing job, and one thing led to another. But when I got my first job set in Choker, I thought I was in hog heaven. Plus, I had a new lover, and she was a hippie, so.
Going back
I found shelter.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about setting choker. What's that referred to? What kind
Well, it's
of
rigging logs.
Okay. Can you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Oh, it's kind of hard to explain.
Okay.
There's nothing else like it. But it's brutal labor, hard labor. But I liked hard labor. Like some people jog or,
Right.
ride their stationary bikes.
I
like getting out in the woods, help me work out my mojo. So we work 60 hours a week, hard physical labor, very dangerous. I like the danger. But the independence and the people, they kind of reminded me of my granddad.
Uh-huh.
I'd watch Los Angeles change under my feet to where the city, I just couldn't take the city anymore. Plus I wanted to stay out of trouble. So what better way to stay out of trouble than make yourself scarce?
What kind of trouble were you afraid of getting into?
I got in lots of trouble. Prison mostly.
Okay.
Figured I wasn't constitutionally fit for prison. And I was also, I failed to successfully readapt to civilian life, basically. Again, it's very common. Nobody really does. My dad was a World War II vet. Both my wife's dads were World War II vets. Spent my whole life around vets. And, civilians just can't understand. It's too otherworldly.
Combat is literally a life-altering experience.
No, I don't think anybody ever lives it down.
Right. You talk about this in both of your books, but you've had a lot of exposure to a lot of interesting professions. Could you maybe just maybe elaborate a little bit on maybe the worst and the best that you've had the opportunity to try?
Well, I love falling timber. I still do that part-time, not timber, but I fall firewood trees, making fire break, thinning forest, reforesting. I love that. It's just single jacking by myself. Usually I have a partner around for safety reasons. I work 4 miles out of dirt road off a remote country road. Then the worst civilian job was, which I write about in my new book, was cleaning out a chicken house down in Windsor. About 20,000 hens per lane. Looked like big barracks, maximum security prisons for chickens. Oh. That was so bad it was funny. That's why I wrote about it. So best thing about it is only lasted a few days.
So it's not like the people that may just clean out a few little chickens in their own little backyard chicken coop then.
No, I was using a fire hose on these, huge mountain, huge. I think it was 20,000 hens per hen house.
Wow!
And there were a whole bunch of them, like piano keys.
And those facilities are still in operation today?
I kind of doubt it.
Okay.
I called it Mount Olive Poultry Ranch, but it was actually Olivet Chicken Ranch. They might still be there, but I don't know if you've been to Windsor lately, but it's not the Windsor I remember.
Right. Now, the title of your first book, Walking Tractor, could you tell the audience a little bit about that terminology?
Well, after spending 30 years taking my living straight from the dirt, the last 15 years, I was a foreman on a pair of horse ranches. Mm-hmm. And finally I lost that job, the horse racing industry's dying. And Anderson Valley, which I'd been in for over 30 years, was gone. The ranching economy, the logger was gone. I'm proud I never worked in a lumber mill. And so I decided to try my hand on writing. And then, I take photographs, and I always carried a camera in my truck.
Right.
So I realized a lot of the landscapes or the buildings I'd taken pictures of were gone. So I just got the idea to try my hand at writing. So I wrote Walking Tractors, 24 short stories, all Anderson Valley, particular place and time, and the people who impressed me, and the jobs I went through, because, as ex-GI, one thing you don't want to do is get killed on a job, or take orders from idiots, or ever take a job you can't quit. So until I had children, if you didn't like the way I was digging ditch, I'd hand you the shovel and move on to the next job.
Right.
Because if you're doing agricultural labor, if you don't, you always have a job, as long as you don't mind working for nothing. So jobs were cheap.
So there were actually two versions of Walking Tractor, an initial version and the second printing. Could you tell the audience a little bit about how you came to do the first printing?
Well, I have a nephew who's in that business, and he was born when I was in Vietnam, and with my dad's help, he's very successful. And I got the idea for Walking Tractor to combine old style pictures with stories, and he made it possible to produce a book, picture with a matching story.
Okay.
And I thought it would do well in the local market. And my minimum objective was, I didn't have to make my capital investment back, but to hit the back market here, among the tourists. Everybody said, well, the only thing left is tourism. So this would appeal not only to the old timers, but to the tourists. Then my maximum objective was to find a publisher, which I did, and that's why there's 2 editions. Heyday Books out of Berkeley.
Right.
They dropped the pictures. It's way too expensive to print pictures in out of sequence on a page, beginning of each story. So that's how the pictures disappeared. Then I decided to use them on my website.
So the pictures are
those and
available
others, yeah.
as a companion piece on the website.
Yeah, just photos. I like taking pretty photos, landscapes.
So would you be kind enough to read a passage from Walking Tractor for our audience?
Yeah. One thing I wanted to do was, like any time you're writing memoir and you're nobody, the people who impressed you. One fellow who impressed me was Claude Rose. Everybody knew him in the old ranching days in Yorkville. He's born about 1900, old retired cowboy. But anyways, here's a little bit about what I wrote about him. Old enough to be my grandpa, old Claude was one of the rarest of breeds, a cowboy with ambition and an education. Old Claude also had a serious sense of humor, and he loved telling riddles. Like, he'd ask, "It's a Friday night, the saloon is shut down, and 3 cowboys are making their way back home to the ranch. They're sitting 3 across in the cab of a pickup truck that's rolling dust down a long dirt road. Now, which of them fellas is the real cowboy?" And after you'd scratched your head and gazed at him in slack-jawed befuddlement, he'd answer that it's obviously the fellow riding in the middle. That one ain't got to drive the pickup truck, and he ain't got to get out to open the gate. And it goes on from there, but
A lot of the tales that you weave in Walking Tractor, are these from recollection, or are some of the people still with us today?
not many of them. When I self-published it, I called it Humor and Adventure. And I wrote it for an inside-outside view of what it was basically big tree redwood logging, which is a dead industry. You won't see it back in our lifetime. Mm-hmm. And those fellows, they were before TV, so storytelling was integral to the lifestyle. I mean, you spend more time logging in bars than you would in the woods bragging about all of whatever this or that you did. So there's some tall tales mixed in, folklore. But I wrote it for entertainment.
Was Walking Tractor a warm-up exercise for writing the prequel, Turned Around in My Boots?
No. My life's always been kick the can down the road. When I wrote Walking Tractor, I thought my next book, if I got to a second one, would be a companion set of stories. But after I signed a Heyday, I immediately realized that I wanted to write something else. And then I quickly realized the easiest thing to be would be explaining how it was when I got a job set in Choker. I thought I was so proud of myself. And before I lived in Mendocino County, I lived in Sonoma County. I spent a winter in a barn. Worst part of my post-war life was absolutely hilarious. So I knew so I went into that. And one of the things I wanted to do was, Walking Tractor was very little autobiography. I was mostly just a greenhorn learning different, the thread that keeps these stories together. So I wanted it to be more novelistic, more autobiographical. Then also in Walking Tractor were no women characters, very few right up until the end when I was working horses. So I wanted to address some of the weaknesses of Walking Tractor, but basically say to the reader, okay, here's episode 2, Walking Tractor's episode, a prequel. It turned out different than I thought. I'd forgotten how being a vet colored everything, my decision making, and how I viewed things.
To my understanding, you don't want to write another book, and that is why your website, fourmules.com, is so important to your storytelling. Would you tell the audience a little about that project?
Well, basically, I finished to get Boots out, took about a year of editing, re-editing. You know, the editor, the acquisitions editor, like when I first turned it in. Oh, I love it, except for this, that, and the other thing. By the way, the ending sucks. So when I finished that process, you know, the last thing I wanted to do was start another book. But I still had stories running around in my head. And everybody says, oh, the future's in the internet. My nephew said, don't believe it. But so I decided to do 36 stories in one calendar year, one every post-original story every 10 days for a year. I just finished that last January 20th. Part of my reasoning for that was maybe I'll find my way to my next book. You know, I didn't. But so maybe I'll never write another book. I don't know. But I'm done with the blog. I'm done with. I don't know where I'm going with in terms of a book. I might go but switch back to short stories magazine market. I'm going to stay writing with the Anderson Valley Advertiser, which I think is a radically improved newspaper, and I'm honored. It's a nice stable of writers. So plus they let me write what I want to write, and you know they don't have time for editing. So.
Has the experience of writing the two books, has it been a very valuable experience for you? Do you think it's up there with some of the jobs that you've enjoyed doing in the past? Has it been cathartic for you in any way?
Well, I like creating beauty. That's why I like humor. You know, I'm a fairly decent humorist, and you know, I like fight fire with water. You know, beauty is superior to ugliness. Bigotry, you get whipped. You know, you fight that with ridicule or humor, and you know, just to create something positive.
There's a lot of beauty in the imagery of your photographs. There's a starkness to a lot of the subject matter that you take, but there's also an incredible simple beauty that you capture. And I know that your photography is beginning to be recognized on a county level. How is the experience of having your photography used as a promotional tool for Mendocino County make you feel?
Oh, I love it. You know, I've had a lot worse things happen to me. But what good is any kind of art if it's not shared? I mean, who tells jokes to the mirror? You know, so just the idea of being able to create something that somebody can look at and say, gee, that's pretty. You know, that's a nice feeling.
Giving
especially
enjoyment.
if somebody is been around so much ugliness in my life. You know, fight fire with water.
Bruce, would you be kind enough to read an excerpt from Turned Round in My Boots, please?
Right. We were earlier asked why I went to Vietnam, and I said I was misinformed also. I was born with the inability to foresee the logical consequences of my own actions. I kicked the can. I never couldn't make the right decision. I was kind of like a mess up. Juvenile delinquent is what I was. And as a matter of fact, when I became an old man, I found out that my affliction wasn't that uncommon, and I usually grow out of it. But when I got out of jump school, everybody went to Vietnam except me, because I joined on my 17th birthday. So I got sent to the 82nd Airborne, and when I showed up there, I didn't feel like going through more training. I was stupid enough to let my new platoon sergeant know that I wasn't happy to be there. So he put me in a squad room full of black soldiers to teach me a lesson. And here's an excerpt about what happened there. Once while we were cleaning the equipment in the squad room, the brothers got to rapping about old Jim Crow. After listening to their personal stories about how hard it had been on them, to call it racial discrimination was like calling a cotton bag a silk purse and a hangman's noose a diamond necklace. In my youthful enthusiasm, I boldly announced that once I got out of this man's army, I was going to grow my hair long just like a dirty hippie. I was going to turn my back on the white man's society and live like I wanted to live. If anybody didn't like the way I looked, that's too bad. I wasn't bending the knee to anyone. Instead of causing the brothers to admire my courage, empathy, and noble ambition, my heartfelt oath had them jumping up off their bunks, pointing at me like I was a chimpanzee, silly slapping themselves, each other, their wall lockers, and laughing their asses off. What? I protested. They thought I wasn't serious. They thought I was just another lying white boy who, the instant I got out of the Army, would forget I'd ever bunked with them or cared about them or sided with them. Our main man in the squad room was a lifer nearing retirement who'd recently gotten busted down to buck private because he'd gotten caught buck naked by a cracker military policeman in a shantytown whorehouse during combat operations in the Dominican Republic. Soon to get zapped during one of his as a private no class in Vietnam, he was called Rock Parks. Twice as old as me and tall for a welterweight, Baltimore bred, streetwise, and hip to the ways of the military, women, a deck of cards, blanket craps, shuck, jive, and shithouse philosophy. Rock Parks was our unofficial squad leader. Rock was also the DJ of our squad room's PX Ghetto Blaster, our banker, legal advisor, master of ceremonies, and muse. Once everybody stopped cackling at me, Rock looked me square in the eye. Like he just ruined the spit shine on his boots, he shook his head, snickered, and answered me in the no-shit Sherlock affirmative. Yes, indeed, I surely was one jive-ass rabbit, au-fait honky, and there weren't any two buts about that. Once I was back on the bricks, Rock haughtily predicted, in the very moment things got too tough for me, shit, the instant somebody offered me more bucks if only I cut my hair, I'd be skying up the boulevard. I'd be frantically knocking poor, helpless women and children out my way to get me a size A haircut to set atop my size D head. In no time flat, I'd have me a little patch of stubble all lathered up with Brill cream. Once the price was right, I'd be profiling my prosperous ass up and down the boulevard in a suit and a tie, clean and cut, sitting for shoe shines and stiffening the shoe shine boys, and learning to hold my supper fork just so. Rock held up an imaginary supper fork just so, his lips pursed. And he was right about the haircut. I did it a couple years later for a union job.
Bruce, thank you so much for taking the time to come and share your stories and to let our audience know a little bit about life in Anderson Valley and the life of Bruce Patterson. I hope that our audience will pick up your book, go to your website, and learn a lot more about fascinating stories that you have to tell.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.